The sledgehammer slammed against my door, echoing through the hallway like a gunshot. My son and his wife screamed outside, convinced I was cowering in the dark. They did not know that 2 police officers and an investigator stood silently behind me, cameras rolling. I watched the wood splinter, calm and ready. When I finally turned the lock, their faces went ghost white. They thought they were rescuing a helpless mother, but they were actually breaking into their own nightmare. My name is Veronica Hale. From the other side of the battered white pine door, I could hear the heavy, wet gasps of my son. Daniel. He was swinging a mallet with the kind of frantic desperation usually reserved for saving a life. But we all knew he was not trying to save me. He was trying to save himself. She is mentally unstable, Brooke. My daughter-in-law screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice pitching up for the benefit of the neighbors she knew were watching. She has locked herself in. She is going to hurt herself. Daniel. Break it down. Hurry. I stood perfectly still in my kitchen. The cheap mallet slammed against the wood again, creating a spiderweb crack near the handle. But I did not flinch. I was not the trembling old woman they thought was cowering in the dark. I was standing straight, smoothing the front of my pressed blue blouse, watching the scene unfold on the monitor connected to the camera hidden in the hallway light fixture. Suddenly, the chaos outside halted. Heavy boots thudded against the floorboards, drowning out Daniel's panting. Police drop the weapon. Step away from the door immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. On my monitor, I saw Daniel freeze, the mallet hovering in mid-air like a conductor caught before the downbeat. He looked terrified. Brooke stopped her performance mid-sob, her mouth hanging open as 2 uniformed officers stepped into the frame, hands hovering near their holsters. A calm, authoritative voice spoke from the hallway, cutting through the tension. It was the lead detective. Everyone back up against the wall. Now. He paused, then raised his voice to address me through the wood. Mrs. Hale. This is Detective Miller. The area is secure. Do you consent to opening this door? I took a deep breath. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of the fear they expected. I am completely sane. Officer, I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up every syllable. And I am recording the fact that these 2 individuals are attempting to forcibly enter my home and threaten my safety. I turned the deadbolt. It clicked with a finality that sounded like a judge's gavel. I swung the door open and stepped into the frame. I had made sure to look impeccable. My silver hair was pulled back in a neat, tight bun. My clothes were spotless. Behind me, the apartment was a picture of order. The kitchen counter was gleaming, and my daily medication was organized in a clear plastic dispenser by a visiting nurse, proving beyond a doubt that I was capable of caring for myself. Daniel and Brooke looked at me, and then their eyes traveled past my shoulder. The color drained from Brooke's face instantly. Standing in the middle of my kitchen, calm and holding a thick manila folder, was Investigator Vance from the district attorney's office. He stepped forward, flanked by the silence of the room. Mrs. Brooke Hale, Vance said, his tone conversational yet lethal. I have a few questions regarding how you have utilized your mother-in-law's pension funds over the last 12 months. Brooke staggered back, as if slapped. Daniel tried to recover, putting on his best grieving son expression, though the mallet lay on the floor at his feet like a smoking gun. Officer, look, Daniel stammered, holding his hands up. This is all just a big misunderstanding. My mother, she gets confused. She agreed to let us manage her finances. We were just worried. I stared at him. The love I once held for that face had been burned away by months of sleeping on a floor mattress and eating cold sandwiches. I pointed a steady finger at the small, blinking red light concealed in the ceiling moulding above us. And today, I said, my voice cold, you just agreed, right in front of that camera, that the best way to handle your mother was to smash her door down with a hammer. Investigator Vance opened the folder. He pulled out a transcript of a text message, holding it up so Daniel could see the timestamp. We have a message here sent from Brooke's phone to yours. Daniel. Dated 2 days ago. Vance read aloud. If she does not withdraw the petition with the court, she can take care of herself. We will cut the power first. He looked up. We have the audio recording of you dictating that message too. Mrs. Hale. Brooke went pale, her lips trembling. The fake tears were gone, replaced by the very real terror of a trapped animal. Sir, the police officer ordered Daniel, stepping forward, place the mallet on the ground. Slowly. The officer examined Daniel's hands, then took out a camera to photograph the deep gouges in the wood of my door. We are documenting this as evidence of attempted breaking and entering, and intimidation of a protected, vulnerable adult. Brooke turned to me. The mask of the concerned daughter-in-law dissolved completely, revealing the snarling greed beneath. Her eyes narrowed into slits. You ungrateful old hag, she hissed. Forgetting the police, forgetting the camera. Without us, you would have starved to death a long time ago. I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of pity for someone so hollow. It is funny, I said softly, hearing that coming from the person who has been stealing the food off my plate. The officers stepped in, effectively walling them off from me. They began reading Daniel and Brooke their rights, informing them they were being trespassed from the building and were strictly prohibited from contacting me. As they were escorted down the hall, arguing with the officers, I slowly closed the door. I leaned my back against the solid wood and let out a long breath. The corners of my mouth lifted in a very thin, very sharp smile. Step 1 was complete. 7 months ago. The silence was different. It was not the pregnant, electric silence of a police investigation, but the suffocating, heavy quiet of a small churchyard in rural Indiana. The service was over. The black cars had driven away, their tires crunching on the gravel, leaving me standing alone by the fresh mound of earth that covered my husband of 42 years. My hands trembled as I bent down to straighten a wreath of white lilies that had already started to wilt in the biting November wind. I spent 40 years as an emergency room nurse. I have seen bodies broken by car accidents, hearts that stopped beating mid-sentence, and the devastating grief of those left behind. I thought I knew death. I thought I knew how to survive it. I never imagined that the skills I spent a lifetime honing would be useless against the slow, calculated dismantling of my life by my own blood. Daniel walked up behind me, his hand heavy on my shoulder. Brooke was right beside him, her face arranged in a perfect mask of concern. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice thick with what I thought was shared grief. "You cannot stay here alone. Not with the winter coming. The roof needs repairs, and the heating system is ancient. Please, come back to Maple Grove with us." Brooke nodded vigorously, clutching my arm. "Just for a few weeks. Veronica? Just until we get the house fixed up. We have the guest room all ready. You need family right now." I looked at them, my vision blurred by tears and exhaustion. I felt small. I felt old. The house Daniel and Brooke shared in Maple Grove was large and modern. The room they gave me was the guest suite on the first floor. It was lovely at first. It had a queen-sized bed with a thick quilt and a large window that looked out over their manicured backyard. "See," Daniel said, setting my suitcase down that first night. "It is perfect. You can rest here." I should have noticed the signs earlier. The control started so subtly that I mistook it for care. It began with the funeral itself. Brooke had selected my black dress, insisting the one I chose was too dated. Then, the day after the burial, she brought up my Buick. "Mom, you are grieving," Brooke had said, pouring me a cup of tea in their gleaming kitchen. "You really should not be driving. Why don't we sell the car? You do not need the stress of insurance and maintenance. Daniel can drive you anywhere you need to go." I hesitated. That car was my independence. But I looked at my shaking hands and thought perhaps she was right. Maybe I was just an old woman who was becoming a danger to others. I suppose. "If you think it is best," I had whispered. "It is practical," Brooke said firmly. "We are just being practical." I told myself to be grateful. I told myself that this is just how the younger generation handles things. They are efficient. I felt a pang of guilt for even questioning them, feeling like a burden that they were gracious enough to carry. They did not know the specifics of my finances then, not fully. I had worked hard. My pension from the hospital system was generous, bringing in nearly $4,800 a month. When combined with the survivor benefits and the small annuity my husband left, my monthly income was close to $6,500. It was more than enough for me to live comfortably on my own, to hire help, to fix my own roof. But in my grief, that number felt abstract. To Daniel and Brooke, I suspect it looked like a winning lottery ticket. For those first few weeks, everything was comfortable. Brooke cooked dinner every night. She bought me new, soft, hypoallergenic pillows because she noticed I was sneezing. She even drove me to meet a financial advisor, claiming we needed to organize my assets to ensure I was secure for the long term. "We just want to make sure you are taken care of," Daniel said during the meeting, holding my hand. "We do not want you to worry about a single bill." I remember lying in that comfortable guest bed one night about 3 weeks after moving in. The sheets were crisp and smelled of expensive lavender detergent. The street outside was quiet. I closed my eyes and thanked God for giving me a son who loved me enough to take me in, and a daughter-in-law who was willing to share her home. I drifted off to sleep, feeling safe and cherished. I had absolutely no idea that it was the last night I would truly be the owner of my own life. The descent was not a sudden drop off a cliff. It was a slow, sliding crumble that started with the geography of the house. 3 weeks into my stay, Brooke decided the guest room with the large window was needed for Daniel's home office. "You need more privacy, Mum," she told me, her smile tight. "The utility room off the garage is much quieter." It was a small, windowless box that smelled of gasoline and damp concrete. My queen bed did not fit, so they replaced it with a lumpy twin mattress. 2 weeks later, even that was gone, replaced by a thin foam pad on the floor because Brooke claimed the frame was scratching the laminate. "It is better for your back," she insisted. "Japanese people sleep on the floor and they live forever." The family dinners stopped around the same time. I would sit in the living room, smelling the rich aroma of searing steak and garlic butter wafting from the kitchen, my stomach growling. Daniel and Brooke would eat at the dining table, laughing over wine. When they were finished, Brooke would bring me a plastic plate with a cold bologna sandwich and a handful of chips, setting it on the counter. "We grabbed takeout on the way home," she would say. Or, "We ate earlier, so you could rest." Then came the financial stranglehold. One afternoon, Brooke sat me down, looking grave. "Mom, you almost clicked the wrong button on the computer yesterday," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You nearly donated $1,000 to a scam charity site. We caught it just in time." I frowned. I did not remember being on the computer at all, but my memory had felt foggy lately, likely from the stress. I did, yes." Brooke sighed. "Daniel and I think it is best if we monitor the accounts online, just for safety." I hesitated. My independence was the last thing I had. But Brooke leaned in, her eyes wide with manufactured stress. "Mom, please. We have the mortgage, the insurance, our student loans. It is a lot to juggle while taking care of you. Just sign the access forms so we can help you. Do not be difficult." I signed. I signed because I felt like a burden. I signed because I was ashamed, to protect me further. Brooke took away my smartphone. She claimed the data plan was too expensive and the interface was confusing me. She replaced it with a cheap, grey flip phone. "It is just for emergencies," she said, slipping my iPhone into her pocket. "I will keep this one charged in the kitchen for you." But the flip phone was never charged, and I was rarely allowed to touch it. Instead, I was given chores. Brooke called it occupational therapy. I was responsible for the laundry, the dishes, and scrubbing the downstairs floors. When I told her my knees were throbbing from kneeling on the tiles, she just tutted. "If you do not move it, you lose it. Mom, we do not want you ending up in a wheelchair." The turning point came on a Tuesday night. I was wiping down the kitchen island when I saw Daniel's laptop open. He had stepped out to the patio to smoke. The screen was glowing with his email inbox. A notification from the bank popped up. I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a transfer confirmation. Transfer from V. Hale to joint checking $4,500. I scrolled down. Last month, $4,500. The month before, $4,200. They were draining me dry. What is this? My voice was raspy. I had not realized I had spoken aloud until Daniel walked back in through the sliding glass door. He froze. Brooke entered from the hallway, drying her hair with a towel. I pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "You? You transferred all my pension money. Almost every cent." Daniel looked at the floor, his face flushing red. He could not meet my eyes. Brooke, however, did not flinch. She walked over and snapped the laptop shut. "It is called pooling resources. Veronica," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "It is easier to manage the household expenses this way. Rent, food, utilities. You live here, remember? $4,500 a month," I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. "I am sleeping on a foam pad next to the garage. I am eating bologna sandwiches. Where is my money going?" "You are being paranoid," Brooke scoffed, crossing her arms. "Are you really accusing your own son of stealing after everything we have done for you? You should be ashamed." "Daniel." I looked at my son. "Daniel, please. Say something." Daniel shifted his weight, looking at the wall, then at Brooke, then finally at his shoes. He said nothing. He simply turned and walked out of the room. That night, lying on the thin foam pad in the cold room, smelling the faint exhaust fumes from the garage. I did not cry. I reached under the mattress and pulled out a small, battered notebook I had salvaged from the recycling bin. In the dark, by the light of the street lamp filtering under the door, I uncapped a pen. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the amount I saw on the screen, $4,500. I was no longer just a mother. I was a witness. And I was beginning to build my case. The walls in that house were thin, constructed from cheap drywall that did little to block out sound, especially when the house was quiet. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the grout in the hallway. A task Brooke had assigned to me because she claimed the cleaning service was too expensive now that they were supporting me. Brooke was in the kitchen around the corner. She thought the running water from the tap masked her voice, but I stopped scrubbing. I held my breath, my knuckles white around the sponge. I am looking for something basic, Brooke was saying into her phone. Her tone was brisk, businesslike, the same way one might order office supplies. Budget is a priority. We are looking at a cap of, maybe $1,300 a month. Yes, she has a decent pension, but she is a bit much to handle at home. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. $1,300. That was the price of a warehouse for the dying, not a care facility. No, Brooke continued, pausing to sip something. She does not need recreational activities or outings. As long as it is secure, we need a place that is safe and easy to control. Distance is not an issue. Actually, further from the city might be better. I felt a cold sweat prickle at the back of my neck. I scrambled up, abandoning the bucket, and retreated to my room before she could catch me. My mind was racing. I needed Daniel. He was my son. He would not let them ship me off to a dumping ground hours away. I cornered him that evening while Brooke was in the shower. He was in the garage, tinkering with his golf clubs. "Daniel," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I heard Brooke on the phone. She is looking at nursing homes. Cheap ones. "Daniel, you promised I could stay here." Daniel did not look at me. He scrubbed the head of a 9-iron with a towel, focusing intensely on the metal. "Mom, look." He started, his voice tight. "It is complicated, Brooke thinks. Well, we think that maybe you need professional help. In a care facility, you have nurses, doctors on call. It is better than what we can give you here." He was repeating her words. I could hear Brooke's cadence in his mouth. "I do not need a doctor." "Daniel," I snapped. "I need my family. And if you cannot host me, then I want to go home. I want to go back to Indiana." Daniel finally looked up, and the guilt in his eyes was so raw, it almost looked like physical pain. "You cannot go back." "Mom? Why not?" I demanded. "It is my house. We had to leverage it," he mumbled, the words tumbling out fast, temporarily, to pay for the repairs, and the property taxes were overdue. We took out a temporary mortgage on it, just until we get back on our feet. The room spun. I grabbed the workbench to steady myself. Suddenly, the last few months flashed before my eyes like a reel of film. Brooke sliding a stack of papers across the table while I was cooking. "Just sign here." "Mum, it is for the bank. It is for the insurance." Brooke handing me a pen while I was watching TV. "Just a formality." "Mum, sign here." I had signed away my autonomy. I had signed away my home. But the true horror did not set in until 3 nights later. It was raining. A heavy, relentless downpour that battered the roof. I was lying on my thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, when I heard their voices drifting through the vent from the master bedroom upstairs. If we move her to the facility in Springfield, the cost is low. Brooke's voice was low but clear. We keep access to the accounts. We pay the facility fee, and the rest, well, the remaining 3,000 or so stays with us. It feels wrong. Brooke, Daniel whispered. Do you want to lose this house? Daniel, she hissed back. Do you want to go bankrupt? Because that is the alternative. Besides, she is old. If we get medical power of attorney, we can make sure things do not drag on. If she gets sick, we just decline active treatment. A few years? Daniel, just a few years, and we are set. I stopped breathing. I lay there in the dark, my blood running cold. I was a nurse for 40 years. I knew exactly what decline active treatment meant. It meant morphine and silence. It meant letting pneumonia fill the lungs until the struggle ceased. It meant death by administrative decision. I had spent my life holding the hands of patients while their families made those impossible choices out of love and mercy. Now, my son and his wife were discussing my end as a line item in a budget strategy. The fear that had paralyzed me for months suddenly crystallized into something harder, sharper. It was a terrifying clarity. They were not just stealing my money, they were planning to erase me. I sat up on the edge of my mattress. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a rage so pure it felt like fire. No. I whispered to the empty, cold room, no. I clutched my chest, feeling the beat of my own heart. It was strong, I was alive, and I was not going to let them turn me into a ghost before my time. If they want to bury me alive, I said into the darkness, making a vow to the woman I used to be. I will drag them to court first. I decided to become the senile old woman they so desperately wanted me to be. It was my only defense, and my most dangerous weapon. I started asking Brooke to repeat simple instructions. I would stare blankly at the television when she spoke to me, waiting 5 seconds before responding. One evening, I deliberately knocked a glass of water off the nightstand just to let it shatter. Oh my God. Veronica Brooke shrieked, rushing in. Can you not hold a simple cup? You are getting worse every day. I am sorry, I stammered, making my hands shake violently. I thought it was lighter. She bought it. She bought every second of it. And as she became convinced I was fading, her guard dropped. She stopped hiding the mail. She stopped locking her purse. I waited for the mornings when Brooke would sigh and shove a stack of outgoing mail into my hands, telling me to walk it to the curb because she was too busy to put on shoes. That walk down the driveway was my lifeline. Mr. Alvarez, the mail carrier, was a man in his 50s with kind eyes who had delivered to this neighborhood for a decade. He knew something was wrong. He had seen the way I had lost weight. Mrs. Hale, he asked one Tuesday, seeing me linger by the box. I looked back at the house. The blinds were closed. I pulled a thick envelope from inside my cardigan. It was addressed to Lauren Mitchell, a former nursing student of mine who had switched to law. I had paid for her textbooks 20 years ago when she was a struggling single mother. I prayed she remembered. Mr. Alvarez, I whispered, pressing the envelope into his hand. Please, do not put this in the outgoing slot. Take it. Mail it from the post office. And if you do not see me for a while, tell someone. He nodded, tucking the letter into his uniform pocket without a word. Inside that envelope was a 4-page handwritten letter. I detailed everything: the isolation, the threats, the lack of food. I wrote, "If I disappear from this city, or if I am found dead from natural causes, please investigate." Back inside, I turned my bedroom into an evidence locker. Brooke had become arrogant. She would leave bank statements on the kitchen island while she unpacked groceries. I would shuffle past, pretending to look for a napkin, while my eyes scanned the numbers. $3,000 for a custom leather sofa. $2,500 for a deposit on a vacation to Florida. $1,200 for a 65-inch television for their bedroom. I did not have a camera, so I used my memory and a ballpoint pen. I would rush back to my room, crawl under the thin mattress, and scribble the figures into my notebook. I noted dates, amounts, and descriptions. I contrasted their spending with the cost of the bread and peanut butter they fed me. One afternoon, I dropped a ceramic bowl in the kitchen. It was an accident this time, caused by genuine weakness from hunger. Brooke exploded. "You useless old burden," she screamed, her face inches from mine. "We feed you, we house you, and you just destroy everything. Maybe the nursing home is too good for you. Maybe a state ward is where you belong." I shrank back, trembling, whispering apologies. But inside, I was ice cold. I was memorizing the pitch of her voice. I was recording the exact phrasing of her threat. State ward. I filed it away in my mind to repeat to a judge. My letter must have reached Lauren. A few days later, the landline rang. I reached for it, but Brooke snatched it off the cradle. "Hello?" Brooke said, her voice instantly transforming into honey. "Oh, hello. No, I am afraid Mrs. Hale is sleeping. She has been having very bad days lately, very confused. She does not want to be disturbed." I stood in the hallway, gripping the doorframe. I wanted to scream, to tell Lauren I was right there, but I knew if I made a scene now, they would take the phone away permanently. Brooke hung up and turned to me with a sneer. "Solicitors, always bothering you." But Lauren Mitchell was a pit bull in a courtroom, and I knew she would not be satisfied with a brush-off. 2 days later, Brooke forbade me from going outside. She claimed the neighbors had seen me stumbling and it was embarrassing her. "You stay inside where it is safe," she ordered, locking the front door and pocketing the key. I sat by the window in the living room, hiding behind the heavy drapes. I watched the street. I waited. And then, at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, I saw it. A beige sedan pulled up to the curb. It was not a delivery driver. It was not a neighbor. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a sharp grey blazer and carrying a briefcase. Even from this distance, I recognized the determined set of her jaw. Lauren, and she was not alone. A woman with a lanyard and an official-looking clipboard got out of the passenger side. I felt a tear hot on my cheek. It was the first time in 7 months I had allowed myself to cry. They were walking up the driveway. The cavalry had arrived. The doorbell rang with a persistence that Brooke could not ignore. She smoothed her hair, plastered on her practiced smile, and opened the door. But her body blocked the entrance as if she were guarding a vault. Standing on the porch were Lauren Mitchell, looking sharp in her charcoal suit, and a woman I did not know holding a clipboard. "We are just checking in on Mrs. Hale," I heard Lauren say, her voice projecting clearly into the hallway where I stood in the shadows. "This is Keisha Vance from Adult Protective Services." Brooke laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. Oh, goodness. There is no need for all this. Mom has been, well, she has been struggling with severe depression since Dad died. She refuses to eat. She locks herself in her room. We are doing everything we can. Keisha stepped forward, not aggressively, but with the unstoppable momentum of bureaucracy. I understand. Mrs. Hale. However, when we receive a report, state protocols mandate a private interview with the senior citizen. Alone. Brooke bristled. She gets very confused without me. She might say things that aren't true. Lauren stepped in then, her voice cutting through the humid air like a scalpel. Mrs. Hale. Hindering a welfare check is a violation of state statutes regarding vulnerable adult protection. Unless you want a police escort to assist us, you need to step aside. Brooke paled. She stepped back, and I saw her glare at me as she led them to my small room off the garage. When the door clicked shut, the silence was heavy. The room was freezing. Brooke kept the vents closed to save money. Keisha looked at the thin mattress on the floor, then at me. Mrs. Hale? Keisha asked softly, clicking her pen. Do you feel safe in this home? I hesitated. I looked at the door, fearing Brooke was pressing her ear against it. Then I looked at Lauren, whose eyes were filled with a fierce determination. I took a breath. No, I said, my voice steady. I am not safe, and I am not confused. I reached under my mattress and pulled out the cardboard folder. I handed it to Keisha. They have control of my accounts. I told them, the words rushing out now that the dam had broken. I get 1 meal a day, usually a sandwich. I am not allowed to use the phone. And I heard them discussing moving me to a state facility so they can keep the difference in my pension checks. Keisha opened the notebook. Her eyes widened as she scanned the columns of dates and amounts I had copied. Lauren looked over her shoulder, letting out a sharp breath. This is incredibly detailed. Veronica, Lauren said, I was an ER nurse for 40 years. I replied, I know how to chart a patient's decline. Only this time, the patient is me. Keisha began taking photos. She photographed the drafty window, the lack of furniture, and the single plastic cup on the floor. She walked out to the kitchen and photographed the lock on the refrigerator. The contrast between my squalor and their granite countertop luxury was now a matter of public record. They could not remove me that instant, but the wheels were turning. 3 days later, a process server delivered a temporary protection order and a mandate for an immediate independent medical evaluation. The explosion was immediate. You are making all of this up, Daniel screamed, storming into the kitchen where I was drinking water. He slammed the court papers onto the table. We gave you a home. We took care of you. Why are you trying to destroy this family? Brooke was behind him, pacing like a caged cat. You need to call that lawyer and tell her you lied. Tell her you are senile. If you do not, Veronica, I swear. I set my glass down. I turned to look at the son I had raised, the boy I had carried on my hip. I spent my life saving people. Daniel? I said, my voice cutting through his rage. I saved strangers. I saved drunks. I saved saints. Do you really think I will not fight to save myself from you? The medical evaluation was the final nail in their coffin. I was admitted to the hospital for 2 days. The doctors documented a 14-pound weight loss, severe anemia, and signs of chronic malnutrition. It was not just an old woman's complaint anymore. It was medical fact. On my last evening in the hospital, I lay in a real bed, feeling clean sheets against my skin for the first time in months. Lauren sat in the chair next to me, her laptop open. "We have enough for the protection order and to freeze the assets," Lauren said, her eyes gleaming with strategy. "But if we want criminal charges, if we want to make sure they can never do this to anyone else, we need them to hang themselves." She turned the laptop screen toward me. "We are going to move you to a temporary apartment," she explained, "but we are going to let slip that you might have taken some cash or documents with you. We will install cameras. And then? We wait." I looked at the screen, then at the door. "They will come," I said. "They are too greedy to stay away. And when they do," Lauren said, "we will be watching." "Now comes the part where we tighten the tourniquet," Lauren said, sitting across from me in the hospital cafeteria. "We have the medical report proving malnutrition. We have your notebook. That gives us probable cause to petition the court for an emergency freeze on all your assets." I looked at her, stirring my black coffee. "They will be furious. Panic makes people sloppy," Lauren replied, her eyes hard. "They have been living on a surprisingly high income, yours. Once we cut that off, the house of cards falls. And when it falls, they will come looking for the person who pulled the bottom card." I signed the papers that afternoon. With a few strokes of a pen, I revoked every power of attorney I had ever signed under duress. The court order went out to the bank at 9 in the morning on Thursday, by noon. My accounts were locked down tighter than a vault. At the exact same time, Keisha moved me to a safe house. It was a small, subsidized apartment in a complex run by the city for seniors in crisis. It was modest beige walls, industrial carpet, but to me, it looked like a palace, because I held the only key. Lauren had ensured the address was redacted from the initial court filings, listing only a P.O. box. If Daniel and Brooke wanted to find me, they would have to work for it. The reaction was instantaneous. My new burner phone, which Lauren had set up to receive forwarded messages from my old number, began to vibrate off the table around 2 in the afternoon. It was Brooke. First came the rage. "You selfish old witch." The card was declined at the grocery store. "Undo this now, or you will never see your grandchildren again." I did not have grandchildren, a fact she seemed to have forgotten in her hysteria. When I did not reply, the tone shifted to desperate manipulation. "Mum, please. Daniel is crying. We have the mortgage due in 3 days. We cannot lose the house. You know we love you. We were just trying to help you budget. Please call us." I sat by the window, watching the sun dip lower, and felt nothing but a cold resolve. I did not type a single word in response. Instead, I forwarded every text, every voicemail, directly to Investigator Vance. They were building the case against themselves, message by message. Brooke, realizing she was losing control, tried to spin the narrative. I later learned from a neighbor, Mrs. Gable, that Brooke was crying in the driveway, telling anyone who would listen that I had been brainwashed by a cult and that some lawyer was stealing her poor mother's life savings. But Mrs. Gable had seen me looking like a skeleton when the ambulance took me away. She didn't buy it. In fact, she did something better. She listened. 2 days after the freeze, Mrs. Gable was gardening near the fence when she heard Brooke screaming on the phone in her kitchen. The window was open. "I do not care about the restraining order." "Daniel," Brooke had shouted, her voice shrill enough to carry across the yard. She has to have cash stashed in that new apartment. She always hid money in the house. We go there, we scare her, we get the cash, and we make her sign the reinstatement. I found the address on the discharge papers the hospital mailed by mistake. Mrs. Gable called Keisha immediately. They are coming. Keisha told me over the phone an hour later. Investigator Vance says this is it. If they show up to intimidate you, it is a felony. If they try to break in, it is a stronger felony. Are you ready for this? I am ready, I said. We set the stage. The police installed a high-definition camera in the hallway light fixture and another inside my living room. 2 plainclothes officers were stationed in the laundry room down the hall, and Vance was waiting in the bedroom with the door cracked open. On the afternoon of the confrontation, I prepared. I unlocked the heavy deadbolt, but left the standard handle lock engaged. It was not enough to stop a determined intruder, but enough to prove forced entry. I went to the small kitchenette and put a kettle on the stove. The whistle of the boiling water was the only sound in the silent apartment. I poured a cup of Earl Grey tea, the steam rising in the afternoon light. I sat down at the small table facing the door. My hands rested on the placemat, steady and still. I took a sip of tea. It was hot, grounding me in the moment. Then I heard it. Heavy footsteps stomping down the hallway. Angry, hurried whispers. I took another sip. Thud. The first fist hit the door. Open up. Mom Daniel's voice was muffled but aggressive. We know you are in there. I did not move. I just watched the door, waiting for them to make the mistake that would cost them their freedom. I was not the victim anymore. I was the bait. And the trap had just been sprung. The Mallet stopped mid-swing, silenced by the heavy thud of police boots rushing up the stairwell. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a trap finally sprung. Outside, Brooke was still screaming, her voice pitching up into a hysterical falsetto designed to garner maximum sympathy from anyone listening. She is having a psychotic break. You have to help us. She has locked herself in there and God only knows what she is doing to herself. Break it down. Daniel. Break it down before she swallows a bottle of pills. Her performance was impeccable. It was the same act she had used on the neighbours for months, painting me as a demented, fragile burden. But this time, the audience was not a sympathetic neighbour. Police. Step away from the door, the command barked out, sharp and authoritative. Drop the weapon. Now I heard the heavy clatter of the mallet hitting the floorboards, followed by Daniel's panicked stammering. Then, Investigator Vance's voice came through the wood, calm and steady. Mrs. Hale. This is Investigator Vance. The scene is secure. Are you willing to open the door? I took a deep breath. I smoothed the front of my blouse, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror to ensure not a hair was out of place, and looked up at the camera hidden in the smoke detector. The red light was blinking steadily. I am perfectly lucid. Officer. I called out, my voice projecting clearly through the splintered wood. And I am currently recording 2 individuals attempting to force entry into my home after threatening my safety. I turned the deadbolt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. I pulled the door open and stepped into the frame. The look on their faces was worth every second of hunger I had endured. Brooke's mouth fell open, her fake tears drying instantly. She had expected to find a trembling, weeping old woman in a dark, dirty room. Instead, she found me standing tall, dressed in clean clothes, with a meticulously organized apartment behind me. My medication was sorted in a clear box on the counter, visible proof of my competence. But the real blow came when she looked past me. Investigator Vance stepped out from the kitchen, holding a thick manila file. He did not look like a social worker. He looked like a prosecutor ready for a kill. "Mrs. Brooke Hale," Vance said, stepping into the hallway light. "I believe we need to have a conversation about the unauthorized withdrawals from your mother-in-law's pension fund over the last 12 months. Brooke went the color of ash. Her eyes darted from Vance to the uniformed officers, then to the camera lens she finally noticed above my head. Daniel tried to laugh, a wet, nervous sound that cracked in his throat. He held his hands up, palms open, sweat beading on his forehead. "Whoa, wait a minute. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Mum gets confused about money. She asked us to manage it. We were just worried because she stopped answering the phone." I stared at my son, the man I had raised, the man who had watched me eat bologna sandwiches while he drank expensive wine. "And today," I said, pointing a steady finger at the camera, "did I also ask you to take a sledgehammer to my door? We were scared for you," Daniel pleaded, his eyes wide. Vance flipped open the file. "Scared? Is that why Brooke sent this text to your phone 2 days ago?" He held up a transcript. It reads, "If the old witch does not drop the protection order, she is on her own. Cut the power and let her rot." Vance tapped a button on his phone. Brooke's voice, shrill and cruel, played from a recording he had queued up. "Let her rot." Brooke flinched, as if she had been slapped. The officers moved in closer. One of them took a digital camera and began photographing the deep gouges in the wood of my door, placing a small ruler next to the damage. "We are documenting this as felony attempted burglary and intimidation of a protected vulnerable adult," the officer stated flatly. "Daniel Hale. Keep your hands where I can see them." Brooke turned to me. The panic in her eyes curdled into pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask of the sweet daughter-in-law dissolved, revealing the predator underneath. She lunged forward a step before an officer blocked her path. "You ungrateful old bitch," she spat, the venom spraying from her lips. "We gave you a roof. We gave you everything without us. You would have starved in the street months ago." The hallway went silent. I looked her dead in the eye. I did not raise my voice. I did not tremble. "It is truly funny," I said, my tone as dry as bone, to hear that coming from the person who snatched the food off my plate to pay for her own vacations. The officers stepped forward, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder and another on Brooke's arm. They began reciting the Miranda rights, the words flowing in a monotone rhythm. They were not arresting them yet, that would come later, after the warrant was signed, but they were removing them from the premises with a strict trespass order. "You are not to come within 500 feet of this building," the officer warned Daniel, steering him toward the elevator. As they were led away, arguing and looking back with wild, desperate eyes, I stayed in the doorway. I watched the elevator doors slide shut, cutting off their faces. I stepped back inside and closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my back against the solid wood and let out a long, slow breath. My hands were shaking now, just a little. But my lips curled upward. It was a small smile, thin and sharp. Step 1 was finished. They had taken the bait. Now, the real trial would begin. The district courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that usually reminded me of long nights in the hospital waiting room. Today, It smelled like judgment. I sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Lauren, Keisha, and Investigator Vance. Across the aisle, Daniel and Brooke sat huddled with a court-appointed attorney. They were dressed in their Sunday best, Daniel in a navy suit, Brooke in a modest cream blouse, but their faces were grey and drawn, lacking the arrogance they wore in my kitchen. Brooke's lawyer stood up, adjusting his tie with nervous energy. "Your Honor," he began, his voice booming slightly too loud for the small room. "My clients contend that Mrs. Hale is unstable. She is prone to fabrication and self-neglect due to grief. The restrictions they placed on her were for her own safety." Lauren did not even blink. She stood up, her movements precise and lethal, and slid a thick binder across the bench to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a psychological evaluation conducted 3 days ago by Dr. Evans, a state board-certified geriatric psychiatrist," Lauren said, her voice cool. "It confirms Mrs. Hale is cognitively sharp, oriented, and completely competent. The only distress she exhibits is a direct result of trauma inflicted by the defendants." The judge flipped through the binder, her expression unreadable. Then, Lauren nodded to the clerk to dim the lights. On the projector screen, 2 images appeared side by side. On the left was the room they had forced me into, a stained foam mattress on a bare concrete floor, a single plastic cup, and a window jammed shut with a piece of wood. On the right was Daniel and Brooke's master suite, with its Egyptian cotton sheets, silk drapes, and plush carpeting. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a silence that screamed. Keisha took the stand next. She spoke with the clinical detachment of a professional, which made her testimony even more damning. She described the bruising on my arms consistent with malnutrition and anemia. She detailed the 3 separate occasions Brooke had physically blocked the door during welfare checks, citing my delicate condition. Mrs. Hale's story never wavered. Keisha told the judge, looking directly at Brooke, "In my experience, consistency like that does not come from dementia. It comes from truth." Then came the money. Lauren projected the bank statements onto the screen. It was a simple, brutal flowchart. $4,800 entering my account. $4,800 leaving my account and entering the joint account of Daniel and Brooke Hale. And then, the spending. Serenity Day Spa, $300. Modern living furniture, $2,000. Delta Airlines, $1,500. "Can you explain?" Lauren asked their lawyer, pointing to the screen. "Why a woman allegedly sleeping on a floor mattress for her back needed to purchase a hot stone massage package for 2. Their lawyer stammered, flipping through his papers, unable to find a lie that would fit. Finally, Lauren called Daniel to the stand. He looked like a child caught in a lie, sweating under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Hale," Lauren asked, leaning against the railing, "can you tell the court the last time you purchased groceries specifically for your mother?" Daniel froze. He looked at Brooke, who was staring at the table, refusing to meet his eyes. We eat as a family," he mumbled. "She eats what we eat. I am asking for a receipt, Mr. Hale." Lauren pressed, her voice sharpening. "A single receipt for Ensure or vitamins, or even a loaf of bread purchased for her care in the last 6 months. You spent nearly $50,000 of her money. Surely you bought her a sandwich. He had nothing." He slumped in the chair, defeated by his own greed. The judge did not need to deliberate. She looked over her reading glasses at my son and daughter-in-law with a look of profound distaste. The court hereby finds sufficient evidence of financial exploitation and neglect. The judge ruled, her gavel hovering, I am revoking all existing powers of attorney held by the defendants. Ms. Lauren Mitchell is appointed as independent financial conservator, effective immediately. Furthermore, I am forwarding these transcripts to the district attorney's office for the pending criminal investigation. The gavel came down with a crack that signaled the end of their reign. During the recess, as the bailiffs were preparing paperwork, I stepped into the hallway to drink from the water fountain. Daniel appeared from around the corner. He looked terrified. "Mom?" he whispered, glancing around to make sure the officers were not watching. "Mom, please. This went too far. Brooke. She just got a little carried away with the budget. You know how she gets." I straightened up and wiped my mouth. I looked at him, searching for the little boy I used to tuck in at night, but I only saw a stranger. "Daniel?" I said, my voice steady. "You stood there and watched them take the plate away from me. You watched me sleep on the floor for 200 nights. That was not getting carried away. That was a choice." I turned my back on him and walked back into the courtroom. Lauren was waiting at the table with a document. It was the civil lawsuit, demanding full restitution for every cent they had stolen, plus damages for pain and suffering. "Are you ready?" Lauren asked. My hand trembled slightly as I took the pen. But as the ink hit the paper, my grip firmed. I signed my name in bold, dark strokes. I was not just signing a legal document. I was signing my name back onto the deed of my own life. It took 5 months for the criminal trial to begin. By then, the story had leaked to the local press, labeled as one of the most egregious cases of elder financial abuse the county had seen in a decade. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with the hum of whispers that died down instantly when the bailiff announced the arrival of the judge. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mrs. Sterling, laid out the evidence like a master weaver creating a tapestry of cruelty. She projected the bank statements showing the thousands of dollars siphoned for luxury vacations. She displayed the photos of my thin mattress on the concrete floor. She played the video of Daniel swinging the mallet, the sound of the wood cracking, echoing through the silent room like a gunshot. Then, she called me to the stand. I walked slowly, not because I was weak, but because I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to look at the woman they tried to erase. They took away my phone. I told the jury, my voice steady. They took away my car. They cut my food down to a single sandwich a day. But the hunger was not the worst part. The worst part was the silence. I paused, looking directly at Daniel. The most painful thing was watching my son nod in agreement to it all. Brooke took the stand in her own defense. She wore a soft pink cardigan and wept into a tissue, talking about the crushing weight of student loans and the stress of the economy. We never meant to hurt her. Brooke sobbed. We were just drowning in debt. We did not know it would get this bad. Mrs. Sterling did not even look up from her notes. She simply walked to the podium and read a text message Brooke had sent to a friend 3 months prior. "You wrote here," Mrs. Sterling said, her voice cutting through Brooke's performance. "If the old hag gets weaker, it is actually better. It costs less in doctor bills if she's too tired to complain." "Mrs. Hale, was that your idea of stress management?" Brooke froze, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The jury looked at her with collective disgust. Daniel tried to save himself. When it was his turn, he hunched his shoulders and claimed he was a victim of Brooke's manipulation. It was her plan. He stammered. She handled the money. I just went along with it to keep the peace. Mrs. Sterling produced a single sheet of paper. This is an email from your personal account to a real estate agent, sent 2 weeks after your mother moved in. You wrote, "How fast can we sell the house once we get power of attorney? We need the cash for the renovation." You were not a bystander, Mr. Hale. You were the architect. The sentencing was swift. The judge described their actions as depraved and calculating. Brooke was found guilty of elder abuse, embezzlement, and criminal intimidation. Daniel was found guilty of conspiracy and accessory to the abuse. They were sentenced to 5 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution plus punitive damages. As the bailiffs moved to cuff them, Daniel turned to look at me. His eyes were wide with a mix of terror and a belated, desperate regret. "Mom," he mouthed, "I am sorry." I stood up. I did not shout. I did not cry. "You chose your own prison," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet room, "the day you let me sleep on the floor." After the courtroom cleared, Lauren handed me a thick envelope. It contained the final court orders. My assets were fully restored, my identity protected, and a permanent restraining order was in place. "It is over. Veronica," Lauren said, squeezing my hand. I went back to my small apartment. It was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, not the silence of a cage. I hired a locksmith to install a heavy-duty deadbolt, the kind that could stop a battering ram, on the inside of the door. I hung a small wooden sign I had bought at a craft fair. It read, "This place no longer welcomes those who come with hammers, only those who come with respect." That evening, I cooked myself a proper dinner. I made roast chicken with rosemary and potatoes, filling the air with the scent of comfort. I sat at my small table, poured a glass of wine, and turned on the television. The local news anchor was talking about a new bill being introduced in the state legislature to tighten oversight on power of attorney laws, informally dubbed the Veronica Act. I took a bite of my dinner. It tasted like freedom. In the warm yellow light of my kitchen, I did not look like a conqueror who had won a war. I looked like a woman who had simply, finally, taken back the pen to write the end of her own story. And that was the deepest revenge of all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.